The jungle of Vera was alive with sound. Massive trees stretched high into the sky, their branches heavy with strange glowing fruit. Rivers carved through the dense forest, their waters shining under the light of twin moons. Every sound carried a warning. Every shadow held danger. This was not a world where weakness survived. Among the predators of Vera, one name caused fear to spread even among the strongest creatures. That name was Rava, the alpha predator mother. She was taller than any beast around her, with scales that shimmered dark green and silver under moonlight. Her eyes burned golden, sharp and unblinking. Long fangs curved from her mouth, and her claws were like blades that could tear through stone. Other predators avoided her path. Even the flying hunters that ruled the skies gave way when her shadow stretched beneath them. But Rava was not feared only for her strength. She was feared for her cunning. She could track prey for days without being seen. She could vanish into the forest and strike from silence. She was a master of survival. Yet for all her power, Rava was not alone. She had 3 cubs, and they were her pride. The cubs were still young, their scales softer and their claws smaller. But they already showed signs of the greatness within their bloodline. They wrestled with one another, chasing through the tall grass outside the den. Their cries were sharp, filled with eagerness to grow strong. Each movement was clumsy but bold, as though the whole world belonged to them. Rava watched them carefully. Her eyes softened, though her stance remained fierce. A mother on Vera could never relax. Danger was always close. Yet her heart carried a quiet joy whenever she saw her cubs play. They were her future. They were the reason she hunted each night, the reason she fought harder than any other creature. The den itself was carved into a stone cliff, hidden behind vines and jagged rock. It was a safe place, guarded by Rava's scent markings and the bones of beasts she had defeated. Other predators knew to stay away. Yet no place on Vera was ever fully safe. Rava knew this truth well. That evening, as the moons began to rise, hunger pressed at her stomach. Her cubs whined, brushing against her legs, hungry as well. She leaned down and nudged them with her snout, a low growl vibrating through her chest. It was a command for patience. The cubs lowered themselves reluctantly, settling near the entrance of the den. The alpha predator mother stretched her massive limbs. Her claws scraped the stone, leaving marks that would warn any who dared approach. Then she slipped into the jungle, silent despite her size. She moved with purpose, each step careful and smooth. Her golden eyes scanned the shadows, searching for prey large enough to fill her and her cubs. The forest at night was a place of whispers and movement. Small creatures fled at her approach. Birds with bright wings darted into the air, their cries echoing. Far away, a beast howled, but the sound died quickly when Rava answered with a deeper roar. She was the hunter, and no other sound dared to challenge hers. She followed the scent of a grazer herd, massive animals with thick hides and horns like branches. They were dangerous when cornered, but they were prey. Her muscles tightened, ready for the chase. Back at the den, the cubs waited. The night grew colder, and the forest sang with countless voices. The cubs huddled together, comforted by each other's warmth. They trusted their mother's strength. They trusted that she would return with food, as she always had. What they did not know was that far from the cliff, a new sound stirred. It was not the cry of a beast or the hiss of a predator. It was a sharp tearing sound, metal scraping against stone, followed by smoke that curled into the sky. Something had fallen into the jungle. Something not born of Vera. The cubs twitched at the strange noise. Their heads tilted, eyes wide with curiosity. They had never heard such a sound before. It was not a growl, not a hiss, not even the snapping of branches from a charging beast. It was something alien. The youngest cub let out a sharp yip, eager to investigate, but the eldest growled low, pulling the others back. Instinct told them to stay near the den. Meanwhile, Rava lunged from the shadows, striking at a grazer. Her claws sank deep, and her fangs ended the struggle in moments. The herd scattered, thundering through the forest, but the hunt was over. With her kill secured, she dragged the heavy beast across the ground, leaving a trail of blood and broken grass. She thought only of her cubs waiting in the den, of their hunger that would soon be answered. Yet fate had already begun to shift. The smoke from the crash thickened, drifting closer to her territory. Sparks glowed faintly among the trees, and a figure moved weakly within the wreckage. It was no beast of Vera. It was a human, armored and broken, crawling from twisted metal. His breaths were shallow, his face pale beneath the cracked helmet. But his eyes were alive, scanning the alien world around him. The human's name was Tomas. He did not yet know where he had landed, but he knew one thing clearly. This was not a place that welcomed the weak. He dragged himself from the flames, clutching at the strange armor that barely held together. He stumbled toward the forest, unaware that his steps carried him closer to the den of the most feared predator on this planet. The jungle was quiet except for the faint crackle of fire. Smoke curled upward through the trees, glowing orange under the twin moons. The wreckage of a broken ship lay scattered across the ground. Metal pieces sparked and hissed, filling the air with the bitter smell of fuel. The forest creatures stayed far away, for the strange light and noise did not belong to their world. From the twisted remains crawled Tomas. His body ached, and his head throbbed from the impact. His armor was scorched, edges bent from the crash. He dragged himself over the soil, pulling free from the wreck. His breaths came heavy, but his mind stayed sharp. He had survived worse, though never on a world like this. He forced himself to sit against a broken piece of hull. His eyes studied the trees. The jungle was alive, yet different from the forests of Earth. The plants glowed faintly in shades of green and blue. The air was thick, heavy with unknown scents. Sounds echoed in every direction, from hisses to cries to distant roars. He tightened his grip on his weapon, though the energy cell inside blinked faintly, almost drained. Tomas whispered to himself, a habit born from long missions alone. He reminded himself of his training, of survival rules. Shelter first, water second, food third. Yet as he looked around, he knew the greatest rule of all was different here. Avoid the hunters. He could feel eyes watching him already. Shadows shifted in the branches. Something moved in the undergrowth, quick and silent. He had landed in the territory of something powerful, and it would not take long before it found him. Far away, the cubs of Rava stirred. The strange smoke and glowing sparks had drawn their attention. The youngest cub rose first, stepping carefully out of the den. His golden eyes were wide with wonder. He sniffed the air, catching the bitter scent of fuel. The middle cub followed, tilting her head, ears twitching. They had never seen fire before, and curiosity pushed them forward. The eldest cub growled softly, warning them to stay back, but his siblings ignored him. The pull of the unknown was too strong. Step by step, they moved toward the light. Their paws made little sound on the soft earth. They moved with the instinct of hunters, though their movements were clumsy compared to their mother. Tomas did not hear them at first. His head leaned back against the broken hull, his eyes struggling to stay open. Exhaustion weighed on him, but instincts sharpened when he caught the faint sound of rustling leaves. He gripped his weapon tighter, forcing himself to his feet. His legs trembled, yet he stood ready. The cubs emerged from the shadows. Their eyes gleamed in the firelight. Tomas froze. At first, he thought they were smaller predators, but their scales, their golden eyes, and their sharp teeth told him enough. These were young, too young to be fully dangerous, but young enough to bring trouble. If cubs were here, their mother was not far. The youngest cub yipped, stepping closer. His nose twitched as he sniffed at Tomas. The human raised his weapon, but something in the cub's curious gaze stopped him. The little predator was not charging, not attacking. It was studying him, tilting its head as if trying to understand. The middle cub circled around, her eyes fixed on his armor. She let out a playful growl, then pounced at a loose piece of plating on his leg. Tomas stumbled back in surprise. The cub bit down lightly, tugging the scorched armor, but not with intent to harm. It was like a pup chewing at something new. Tomas tried to push her away, but the youngest cub joined in, pawing at the armor. Their growls and yips filled the clearing, not with threat but with excitement. To them, his armor was something fascinating. It shimmered in the firelight, strange and strong. They had never seen such a thing, and their playful nature overcame caution. The eldest cub remained at the edge of the clearing, watching carefully. His eyes never left Tomas. He did not move to play, yet his tail flicked in agitation. His instincts told him danger was near, though even he could not resist glancing at the glowing armor with interest. Tomas lowered his weapon slowly. He could sense they did not mean harm, at least not yet. His training told him never to waste energy in pointless struggle. Instead, he stood still, letting the cubs tug and paw at him. A soft hiss escaped his helmet as he released a breath, calming himself. The armor shifted under the cub's claws. Suddenly, one of the systems activated, perhaps triggered by the constant pressure. The plating loosened and reformed, sliding free from Tomas's body. Before he could stop it, the youngest cub stumbled backward with a chest piece clutched in his claws. The armor's adaptive system glowed faintly, scanning for a new host. To Tomas's shock, the chest piece adjusted itself and clamped gently around the cub's torso. The little predator froze for a moment, then let out a loud excited cry. The armor fit snugly, protecting him without hurting. The cub puffed his chest proudly, strutting in front of his siblings. The middle cub barked, eager to try. She clawed at Tomas's arm, pulling loose another piece of plating. Again, the adaptive system glowed, reshaping to fit her smaller body. In moments, she too stood armored, her scales hidden beneath a shell of alien technology. She jumped in circles, the sound of her paws clanking against metal filling the clearing. Tomas stood frozen, half in disbelief, half in fear. His armor was advanced, designed to adapt, but it had never been meant for creatures like these. Yet here were two cubs, prancing proudly in his gear, their eyes gleaming with joy. The eldest cub finally stepped closer, growling low as if claiming his turn. He tore free a gauntlet and shoved his paw inside. The system responded again, reshaping the glove into a clawed gauntlet that fit him perfectly. He raised it high, testing its weight, then struck at the ground. Sparks flew where metal claw met stone. Tomas could only stare. The cubs had turned his armor into playthings, yet in their paws, the technology became something more. It made them stronger, sharper, braver. He felt a chill run through him. If their mother returned now, what would she think of him? The cubs, however, thought nothing of danger. They marched around him proudly, letting out playful roars. The youngest stumbled with the heavy chest plate, but he refused to remove it. The middle cub leaped onto a rock, standing tall as though she were already a hunter. The eldest flexed his armored claw again and again, watching the sparks dance. In the shadows beyond the clearing, golden eyes opened. Rava had returned with her kill, dragging the grazer across the soil. She froze as her gaze fell on the sight before her. Her cubs were not waiting at the den. They were here, surrounding a strange creature, their small bodies wrapped in glowing armor not of this world. The alpha predator's muscles tensed. Her jaws parted in a deep, rumbling growl. She dropped the carcass of her prey, her tail lashing the ground. The sight of her cubs wearing the armor of an alien filled her with fury and confusion. Who was this human? Why were her cubs playing at his side? The jungle fell silent. Every sound of insect, bird, and beast vanished at the echo of Rava's growl. The alpha predator stepped from the trees, her golden eyes burning with fury. Moonlight gleamed across her scales as her claws dug into the earth. She was strength, she was power, and her presence made even the shadows retreat. Her cubs froze at once. The youngest whimpered softly, the chest plate glowing faintly around him. The middle cub crouched low, tail curling, but her eyes still shone with playful pride. The eldest stood firm, his armored claw raised, though even he trembled beneath his mother's gaze. Tomas felt his breath catch in his throat. The predator before him was larger than anything he had ever faced. The stories of alpha predators were known in scattered whispers among explorers. They spoke of creatures that ruled entire hunting grounds with unmatched strength. Now one stood only a few steps away, and her rage was aimed at him. Rava moved closer, muscles rippling under her scales. Her gaze passed over Tomas only briefly. Her focus was on her cubs, dressed in the armor of a stranger. She did not understand the strange glowing metal, but she understood one thing clearly. This human had touched her young. She roared, the sound shaking leaves from branches. Her cubs yelped, backing away. The youngest tried to remove the armor, scratching at the chest plate, but the adaptive system held firmly. The middle cub stumbled as she shook her limbs, the armor pieces clicking loudly. The eldest hissed, raising his armored claw toward Tomas, not against his mother, but as if to show he had gained strength. Rava's fury deepened. She lunged forward, her claws striking the ground only steps away from Tomas. The earth cracked, dirt scattering. Tomas stumbled back, raising his weapon with shaking hands. He knew a single shot would not stop her. His weapon was nearly drained, and even if it was full, could it pierce the scales of an alpha predator? He doubted it. But something strange happened. Instead of tearing into him, Rava paused. Her cubs cried out, circling between their mother and the human. The youngest pressed against Tomas's leg, still wearing the glowing chest plate. The middle cub stood at his side, head tilted as if defending him. The eldest moved to block Rava's direct path, his armored claw raised in warning. Rava blinked, confused. Her cubs had never shown such behavior. They had never defended prey. Yet here they were, not attacking the human, not running from him, but standing with him. Their eyes were filled not with fear but excitement. They did not see the human as a threat. They saw him as something else. Tomas lowered his weapon slowly. He looked at the cubs around him, then at the towering mother. His voice shook, yet he spoke with calm, hoping tone would mean more than words. "I am not your enemy," he said softly, though he knew she could not understand his language. Still, he hoped his voice carried no fear. Rava tilted her head, her golden eyes narrowing. The sound of his voice was strange, unlike any call of beast or song of bird. She did not understand his words, but she felt the weight of his tone. It was steady, controlled. He was not begging for life, nor was he challenging her. He was speaking with intent. The cubs yipped and pawed at the armor, drawing her attention again. The youngest bounced in excitement, the chest plate glowing brighter with every movement. The middle cub leaped onto a rock, striking a proud stance with the strange plating hugging her scales. The eldest slammed his armored claw into the ground, sending a flash of sparks upward. They were not afraid. They were delighted. For the first time, Rava hesitated. She had expected her return to end in blood. She had expected to tear apart the intruder and strip away whatever strange things he had brought. But her cubs had claimed these things. They had embraced them. She could not ignore their joy, nor their bravery in standing between her and the human. Tomas slowly removed his helmet, letting it fall at his side. His face was pale, scratched, and weary, but his eyes were steady. He lifted his empty hand and lowered it toward the ground, showing he carried no threat. His other hand still held his weapon, but he pointed it down. He made himself as small as he could without collapsing. The cubs looked between their mother and the human. Their tails swished, their bodies tense, as if waiting to see who would strike first. Rava stepped closer, her nose lowering until her breath washed over Tomas. The heat of it carried the smell of blood and the fresh kill she had dragged earlier. Tomas did not move. Sweat dripped from his face, but his body stayed still. The youngest cub pressed closer to him, rubbing his armored side against the human's leg as though trying to show his mother that this stranger was part of them. The middle cub chirped, tilting her head proudly, showing off her glowing armor as if it were a trophy. The eldest growled low, not at his mother but at the thought of her harming the human. Rava let out a low growl, deep and rumbling, yet not as sharp as before. She pulled back slightly, her gaze flicking from the human to the armor. Her instincts screamed to attack, yet her mother's heart urged patience. Her cubs were alive, unharmed, even stronger. She would not strike yet. Tomas felt a wave of relief, though he did not relax completely. He knew this was only the beginning. The alpha predator had not accepted him, but she had not ended him either. Something fragile balanced in the air between them. The cubs broke the tension with their innocent play. The youngest leaped at his siblings, chest plate clanging as he tumbled into them. The middle cub barked, biting gently at the gauntlet of the eldest. The eldest struck the ground again, sending sparks flying, proud of his new strength. Their playfulness filled the clearing, easing the silence. Rava watched carefully. A deep thought stirred in her mind. The strange armor made her cubs stronger, more confident. It was not natural, yet it was powerful. If it could protect them from threats greater than herself, could it be accepted? Could this human be tolerated? Tomas sank to one knee, lowering himself further. His heart still pounded, but his mind worked quickly. He reached slowly into a small pack at his side and pulled free a small energy cell. He held it out, palm open, showing he offered no threat. The eldest cub was the first to step forward. He sniffed the glowing object, then snatched it carefully, carrying it back to his siblings. They batted at it, curious as ever. The glow fascinated them. Rava's eyes narrowed once more. The human was giving her cubs something strange, yet not harmful. She watched every movement closely, her muscles ready to strike if danger showed. But again, her cubs were safe. For the first time, Rava's growl faded. She lowered herself slightly, not in surrender, but in consideration. The human had not harmed her cubs. He had not fought them. Instead, he had given them strength and strange gifts. The alpha predator turned her gaze toward Tomas one last time that night. She did not roar again. She did not strike. She simply watched. The clearing was heavy with silence, broken only by the clanking of armor on small bodies. Rava stood tall, her golden eyes burning as she watched her cubs circle the strange human. She had returned from her hunt with a kill large enough to feed them, yet the sight before her struck harder than hunger ever could. Her cubs were no longer waiting at the den. They were here, dressed in the shining plates of an alien. Her instincts screamed for action. She should tear the stranger apart, strip the strange metal from her cubs, and crush it until nothing remained. Yet when her claws flexed against the earth, her cubs cried out, stepping in front of the human. Their tiny growls rose like defiance, sharp and brave, though their voices were far too small to match her strength. Tomas stayed on one knee, his head bowed slightly, his weapon pointed toward the ground. He understood his position clearly. One wrong move would end his life. The alpha predator's rage was like a storm pressing against his chest, yet he did not retreat. He had seen her pause, and he knew that pause meant a chance. The youngest cub shifted, the chest plate glowing brighter as if proud of its new host. He pressed against Tomas's leg again, letting out a playful chirp. The middle cub yipped loudly, pawing at the ground while her armor clicked with every movement. The eldest stood directly between Tomas and Rava, his armored claw raised high, sparks dancing when he struck stone. Rava's eyes narrowed. Her cubs were not afraid. They had chosen to wear the strange metal. They had chosen to stand with the human. Their actions confused her, but their safety was undeniable. They were not harmed. Instead, they seemed braver, stronger, even joyful. She took a step closer. The ground shook beneath her weight. Tomas tightened his grip on his weapon but did not lift it. His voice came low and steady. "I do not want to hurt them," he said, though he knew she could not understand his words. Still, his tone carried calm, and that tone mattered more than language. Rava lowered her head until her breath swept over him. Her growl rolled through the clearing like thunder. She was testing him, measuring his fear. Tomas did not break. His knees shook, but his eyes stayed steady. He did not challenge her, yet he did not crumble. The cubs moved closer to him again. The youngest leaped at his side, climbing clumsily against his shoulder before sliding back down with a clank. The middle cub ran in a circle, barking with excitement, her armor reflecting the firelight. The eldest crouched, his tail flicking, watching both his mother and the human as though trying to guard both at once. Rava pulled back slightly, her fury twisting into thought. The human had not taken her cubs by force. He had not harmed them. He had given them something powerful, something that made them proud. Could such a creature truly be prey? Or was he something else? Tomas felt the shift in her stance. It was small, but it was there. Her growl had softened. Her claws, though still sharp and ready, did not rise to strike. He took the chance to show trust. Slowly, he set his weapon on the ground beside him and lifted both hands, palms open. The eldest cub yipped, striking the ground with his armored claw again as if to show approval. The youngest nipped at Tomas's boot, then rolled onto his back, the chest plate glowing as he wriggled in playful pride. The middle cub leaped onto a fallen branch, lifting her head high as though wearing a crown. Rava tilted her head. Her cubs were behaving as if the human were part of their pack. She could not understand it, yet she could not deny it. The carcass she had dropped earlier still lay at the edge of the clearing, blood staining the soil. Her hunger had been pushed aside by this strange meeting, but the scent of food returned to her senses. She growled low and padded toward it. Tomas stiffened, uncertain if she meant to circle and strike, but instead she gripped the carcass in her jaws and dragged it closer. With a heavy thud, she dropped it before her cubs. The young ones pounced eagerly, tearing at the meat with small but sharp teeth. Their armor clanked as they wrestled over pieces, growling playfully at one another. Their hunger was answered, their joy renewed. Rava sat back on her haunches, her eyes never leaving Tomas. This was a test. She was feeding her cubs while he was still present. If he tried to interfere, if he tried to claim what was not his, she would end him. Tomas understood. He remained still, lowering his gaze slightly to show no challenge. Yet hunger gnawed at him too. He had not eaten since before the crash. His stomach twisted as the smell of fresh meat filled the air. He forced himself to stay calm, though weakness showed in his trembling hands. The eldest cub noticed. His golden eyes studied Tomas, then he tugged free a strip of meat with his armored claw. With a sharp bark, he dragged it across the soil and dropped it near the human's feet. The gesture was small, but it was clear. Rava's eyes widened faintly. Her eldest had shared food, an act reserved only for pack. She growled, not in anger, but in confusion. Tomas stared at the offering. His throat tightened. Slowly, carefully, he picked it up. He did not devour it. Instead, he lifted it with both hands, nodding slightly in respect toward the cub, then toward Rava. Only then did he bite into it, chewing slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. The alpha predator rumbled deep in her chest. This was no ordinary prey. Prey did not eat with the pack. Prey did not win the trust of cubs. This human was something different. The night stretched on. The fire from the wreck burned low, fading into glowing embers. The cubs, full from their meal, curled near the carcass. Their armor clanked softly as they shifted in sleep. The youngest snored faintly, his chest plate glowing like a small lantern. The middle cub twitched in dreams, her claws scraping against stone. The eldest remained half awake, his armored claw resting protectively near Tomas. Rava stood guard over them all. Her golden eyes stayed fixed on the human. She did not sleep. She did not fully accept him. But she did not drive him away either. Tomas leaned back against a broken hull piece, exhaustion heavy on his shoulders. His mind replayed the night's events again and again. He knew this was only the start. The alpha predator had spared him, but only because of her cubs. Tomorrow, she might decide differently. Still, as sleep pulled at him, a single thought gave him strength. The cubs had chosen him. Their innocent curiosity had protected him when nothing else could. And perhaps, just perhaps, it would give him a place here, even in the shadow of their mother. The jungle whispered with the sounds of night. The moons climbed higher. And in the clearing of broken metal and glowing armor, an unlikely bond began to form. The sun rose over the jungle of Vera, casting golden light through the tall trees. The mist clung to the ground, curling around roots and rocks like a living thing. Birds with bright wings filled the sky, their cries sharp and high. The forest was awake, and with its awakening came the call of hunters. Rava stood at the edge of the clearing, her cubs still sleeping in a pile of armor and scales. Her golden eyes fixed on the human who had survived the night. Tomas stirred slowly, his body stiff from wounds and exhaustion. He pushed himself up with effort, his gaze meeting hers. For a moment neither moved. They were measuring one another again, predator and stranger, mother and intruder. The night had ended without blood, but Rava was not satisfied. She had spared him once, yet her instincts demanded proof. If this human was to remain near her cubs, she needed to know what he truly was. Was he weak prey who had stumbled into fortune, or was he something more? She turned without a sound, her tail sweeping through the mist. With powerful strides, she walked into the jungle. After a few steps, she paused, her head turning slightly toward Tomas. It was not a command, but it was an invitation. Tomas understood. His body ached, his weapon was weak, yet he knew what this meant. She was testing him. If he followed, he would face whatever waited ahead. If he refused, she would see him as unworthy, and his life would end before the day was done. He gathered what strength he had and stepped after her. The forest closed around them, shadows deep under the canopy. Every sound seemed louder here, every movement sharper. Rava moved like flowing water, her body silent despite her size. Tomas stumbled at first, but he kept close, watching her steps, copying her silence. Hours passed as they tracked through the jungle. Rava's nose twitched, following a scent. Her claws scraped against tree bark as she marked her path. Tomas studied the signs she left, realizing she was teaching him without words. She wanted him to see how a true hunter moved, how a true hunter tracked. At last, they reached a wide clearing where the trees bent away as if afraid of what lived there. The soil was torn with deep scars, the air heavy with the musk of a great beast. Rava crouched low, her eyes burning with focus. She had brought him to the den of a Grawl, one of the largest and most feared creatures in this region. The Grawl was a mountain of muscle and scale, its body covered in spikes that shimmered like black stone. Its roar shook the ground, scattering birds from the canopy. Few dared to hunt it. Even Rava had faced it only once before, and the scars along her side carried the memory of that battle. Tomas's throat tightened, but he did not back away. He checked the charge on his weapon. The cell was almost empty, yet enough for a few shots. He would need to use them wisely. His mind raced, searching for weakness. The beast's belly was softer, its eyes less armored, but striking either would be dangerous. Rava looked at him, her gaze sharp. Then she stepped forward, announcing her challenge with a roar. The Grawl answered with fury, its tail slamming against the ground, sending dirt flying. The battle began. Rava lunged first, claws flashing as she struck at the beast's flank. The Grawl swung its spiked tail, forcing her to leap aside. Tomas fired a shot, the energy bolt striking the beast's eye. It roared, staggering back, its attention splitting between the predator and the human. Rava's golden eyes flicked toward Tomas. She had seen his aim. She had seen his courage. With a deep growl, she pressed the attack. Together they circled the monster, striking from two sides. The Grawl charged at Tomas, its massive jaws opening wide. Tomas dove aside, rolling across the soil, the teeth snapping shut only inches from his body. He scrambled to his feet, firing another shot into the softer skin beneath its arm. The beast roared again, blood spraying across the ground. Rava leaped onto its back, her claws tearing into the thick scales. She bit down hard, her fangs sinking deep. The Grawl thrashed, rolling and bucking to throw her off. Tomas saw his chance. With the last of his energy cell, he aimed at its exposed belly and fired. The shot burned deep, the smell of scorched flesh filling the air. The Grawl staggered, its strength fading. Rava struck once more, her claws ripping across its throat. With a final cry, the beast collapsed, shaking the ground with its fall. Silence returned to the clearing, broken only by the heavy breaths of hunter and human. Rava stood tall on the fallen Grawl, her chest rising and falling. Blood stained her claws, her golden eyes glowing brighter than ever. Tomas leaned on his weapon, gasping, his body trembling from exhaustion. Yet he still stood. Rava leaped down and approached him. Her gaze held no fury now, only thought. He had fought with courage. He had aimed true. He had not fled when death came near. For the first time, she saw not prey but a fellow hunter. She growled low, not in threat but in recognition. Then she turned back toward the jungle, expecting him to follow. Tomas felt his strength nearly gone, but a spark lit in his chest. He had survived the test. More than that, he had earned her respect, even if only a little. With slow steps, he followed her once again. Back at the den, the cubs stirred as their mother returned. They yipped excitedly, running to her side, their armor clanking as they moved. They smelled the blood of the Grawl and knew a great battle had been fought. To their surprise, Tomas walked behind her. His face was pale, his body weak, but his eyes carried pride. The cubs rushed to him, pressing against his legs, chirping with excitement. They smelled his courage too. Rava settled at the entrance of the den, her golden eyes watching them all. She had brought him to face the Grawl, and he had survived. She would not call him pack yet, but she would no longer see him as weak prey. The cubs climbed over Tomas, their claws tapping against the remains of his armor. The youngest still wore his glowing chest plate, shining in the night. The eldest lifted his armored claw proudly. The middle cub curled against Tomas's side, purring softly. The jungle around them whispered with wind and distant cries, but within the den there was peace. For the first time since the crash, Tomas felt he might have a place here. The sun had climbed high over the jungle of Vera, but the day was tense. A strange stillness had settled over the forest, and even the birds were silent. Rava's golden eyes scanned the trees, her muscles tense and ready. Tomas followed closely, leaning on his weakened legs, but alert. He had recovered slightly after the previous day's hunt, yet he knew danger still lurked. The cubs played nearby, their armor clanking softly as they wrestled with one another. They laughed with sharp, excited yips, completely unaware of the unseen danger approaching. Their innocence was a shield, but it could not last forever. Rava sniffed the air and stiffened. A foul scent drifted toward them, carried by the wind. It was thick with decay and a smell of something unnatural. Her ears twitched. Tomas noticed her pause. He knew immediately that this was no ordinary predator or Grawl. Something larger, stronger, and more dangerous moved in their direction. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath them. Trees shook as if caught in a storm. From the shadows emerged a creature unlike anything Tomas had seen before. Its body was massive, covered in jagged armor like scales. Its eyes glowed red, filled with hunger and rage. A long tail ended in a spiked club, and its claws could crush boulders with ease. The predator of predators had come to challenge the alpha predator. The cubs froze, yipping nervously. The youngest crouched, chest plate glowing faintly. The middle cub hissed, stepping behind Tomas for cover. The eldest raised his armored claw, sparks flying as he struck the ground in warning. Even with their armor, they were no match for the enormous intruder. Rava stepped in front of her cubs, growling low and deep. Her tail lashed the ground, kicking up dirt and leaves. She bared her fangs, making herself look larger, more threatening than the intruder. Her roar echoed through the jungle, shaking smaller predators from the trees. The creature roared back, a sound that shook the earth. Its massive legs propelled it forward, charging with terrifying speed. Tomas gritted his teeth. He had only a few shots left in his weapon, and he knew the alpha predator would rely on him for support. The first strike came fast. The creature swung its spiked tail toward Rava. She leaped to the side, claws raking the air as she narrowly avoided the blow. The force of the tail crushed a tree trunk where she had stood moments before. Tomas fired at the creature's side. The energy bolt struck, and sparks flew off its scales. It roared in pain, turning its glowing eyes toward him. He dove behind a fallen tree to avoid the swipe of its claws. His mind raced, searching for a way to protect the cubs while still aiding Rava. Rava lunged, striking the creature across its flank. Her claws dug deep, cutting through the thick scales. The beast twisted, slamming into her with full force. She rolled away just in time, muscles straining with the impact. Tomas fired another shot, hitting its exposed leg. The creature stumbled but did not fall. The cubs watched from behind a rock. The youngest yipped, stepping forward with the chest plate glowing brighter. The middle cub barked, running in a circle, showing courage despite their fear. The eldest struck his armored claw into the ground again, sparks flying to remind the intruder that the cubs were not helpless. Rava's golden eyes flicked toward Tomas. She had fought alone before, but this beast was too strong for her to manage alone. She needed him to act. Tomas understood. He aimed carefully at the creature's soft underbelly, moving with precision despite his exhaustion. The creature lashed again, this time swinging its massive claw at Tomas. He dodged and fired, striking the creature in the eye. It roared, staggering back, its attention split between predator and human. Rava seized the opportunity, leaping onto its back. Her claws dug in deep, fangs sinking into thick muscle. The battle raged across the clearing. Trees were torn down, and rocks flew with every strike. Tomas darted around, firing precise shots at weak spots while Rava struck with power and speed. The cubs watched, inspired, knowing their mother and this human were fighting together. At one point, the creature lunged at the cubs. The youngest stumbled, chest plate glowing brightly. Tomas rushed forward, catching him before the claws struck. He rolled, positioning himself between the cubs and danger. The middle cub hissed, striking the air with a paw, showing bravery despite fear. The eldest struck the ground with his armored claw again, sparks flying. Rava roared, furious at the attempt on her young. She struck the creature again, her claws ripping deep wounds into its scales. The beast staggered, its movements slowing. Tomas saw his chance. With careful aim, he fired his last shot at its underbelly. The energy bolt hit perfectly, and the creature roared in pain, stumbling to one knee. Rava pressed her attack. With a final leap, she struck the creature's throat with all her strength. The beast shuddered and fell, its red eyes dimming. The jungle fell silent once more, the only sound the heavy breaths of the alpha predator and the human. The cubs ran forward, armor clanking as they rushed to their mother. They circled her, chirping and yipping in excitement. They had witnessed their mother and Tomas fight together, side by side. They knew now that the human was not just a stranger. He was a protector. He was an ally. Rava lowered herself beside the cubs, her golden eyes softening. She looked at Tomas. He was bruised, his armor scratched and dented, yet he was alive. He had fought beside her, protecting the cubs when even she could not reach them. His courage had saved them all. The cubs climbed over Tomas, their armor clanking as they pressed against him. The youngest rubbed his glowing chest plate against Tomas's leg. The middle cub chirped, curling against his side. The eldest flexed his armored claw proudly, sparks dancing as he did so. Rava rumbled low, a sound that vibrated through the clearing. It was not a growl of warning or anger. It was recognition. Tomas had proven himself. He had earned her trust, and more importantly, the cubs had accepted him. Tomas sank to his knees, exhausted, yet a smile touched his lips. He looked at the alpha predator, at her cubs, and realized something important. This was no longer just survival. This was connection. Together, they could face anything. The jungle, the predators, the dangers of Vera, they would face them as one. The sun climbed higher, shining through the shattered trees. The clearing was filled with the smell of blood, sweat and metal, yet it was also filled with a new kind of peace. Rava and Tomas stood side by side, the cubs circling them, their armor glowing faintly in the sunlight. For the first time, Tomas felt that he belonged somewhere, that he was part of a pack. The alpha predator had accepted him, not fully, but enough to know that together they could survive anything. The jungle of Vera was alive with light and sound. Sunlight filtered through the tall trees, painting patterns on the forest floor. Birds called to one another, and small creatures scurried among the roots. The air smelled of damp earth and blooming flowers. Yet within this vibrant jungle, something else had grown, an unusual bond between predator and human. Rava lay near her den, her golden eyes watching her cubs play. The youngest chased a small lizard, chest plate glowing faintly with every movement. The middle cub leaped over a fallen log, practicing flips while his armor clinked with every landing. The eldest prowled with cautious pride, his armored claw clanging as he tested his strength. Each cub had learned from the battles of the past days, gaining confidence and skill. Tomas sat on a rock nearby, resting his back against a tree. His armor was battered, but functional. His body ached, and bruises marked his skin, yet his eyes were bright with satisfaction. He had survived the crash, the tests, and the battles. More importantly, he had survived the jungle with Rava and her cubs, earning their trust. The alpha predator rose to her feet and stretched her muscles. Her eyes scanned the territory, golden and alert. Danger might still come, but for now, there was peace. The cubs circled Tomas and her, their trust in him obvious. They had accepted him fully into their small world. Rava stepped toward Tomas. Her golden eyes held no threat. Instead, they were calm, curious, and even respectful. Tomas stood slowly, nodding to her with quiet acknowledgement. He understood her language now, not in words, but in gestures, glances, and growls. She had tested him, and he had passed. The cubs yipped and ran toward Tomas, tumbling over one another in excitement. The youngest pawed at his chest plate, then nudged Tomas's leg. The middle cub leapt onto a rock beside him, chirping with joy. The eldest flexed his armored claw, sending sparks into the air, as if showing pride in their human ally. Rava watched, muscles relaxed for the first time in days. She had feared that the human might fail, that danger would take her cubs while she fought. Yet he had not only survived, he had fought with courage and skill. Together, they had faced the Grawl and the intruding predator. He had proven himself a hunter, protector, and companion. Tomas reached down and touched the youngest cub gently, careful not to startle him. The cub chirped, leaning into the human's hand. The middle cub nudged him as well, and the eldest brushed against his side with his armored claw. Tomas smiled, a rare and genuine smile, feeling the bond solidifying. Rava let out a low rumble, one of approval. Her cubs froze briefly, then returned to their play, their trust now unshakable. Tomas stood beside her, watching them, and he realized something profound. This jungle, this territory, this pack, he belonged here now. He was not a stranger. He was part of something greater than survival. The days that followed were full of learning. Tomas watched the cubs grow stronger. He taught them new ways to use their armor, how to move silently despite the clanking plates, and how to observe without being seen. Rava observed silently, stepping in only when necessary, her presence a constant reminder of strength. The youngest cub learned quickly, mastering the chest plate that had once seemed heavy and cumbersome. He pranced proudly, testing his strength against logs and rocks. The middle cub showed cleverness, finding ways to use the armor for climbing and hiding. The eldest displayed patience and strategy, learning how to protect both his siblings and Tomas if needed. Tomas and Rava moved together as well. They patrolled the territory side by side, teaching the cubs by example. Tomas learned from her instincts, her keen senses, and her unmatched hunting skill. In turn, Rava learned from his cunning, his careful planning, and his knowledge of tools. Together, they became stronger than either could be alone. One morning, Tomas discovered signs of a new threat. Strange tracks led toward the den, heavier and wider than any local predator. Rava sniffed the ground and growled softly, acknowledging the danger. She did not panic. She knew she had Tomas, and he had her trust. They were ready. The cubs watched silently, armor clanking softly as they crouched beside their mother. Tomas knelt, pointing toward the tracks. They were large, moving fast, and heading toward the den. Rava nodded, muscles tensing. She would lead the defense, and Tomas would act as support. When the threat appeared, a massive beast with jagged scales and glowing eyes, it roared, shaking the trees. Rava leaped forward with power and speed, Tomas following, firing careful shots. The cubs stayed close, observing and learning. Together, they pushed back the creature, using both claws and armor to defend the territory. By the time the sun reached its peak, the intruder was gone. The den was safe, the cubs unharmed. Tomas breathed heavily, his body tired but strong. Rava rumbled, her tail sweeping the ground, and the cubs chirped in excitement. They had seen the bond between human and predator in action, learning that courage and trust could create strength beyond instinct alone. That night, the clearing glowed with quiet peace. The cubs slept, curled around Tomas and Rava. The youngest rested against his chest plate, glowing softly. The middle cub leaned against Tomas's arm, and the eldest lay close to Rava, armored claw draped over the human's leg. Tomas looked at Rava. Her golden eyes met his, calm and knowing. She did not speak, but in her gaze was acceptance. He had proven himself, not only through battle but through patience, care, and courage. He was family now. In the days that followed, word of the new pack spread. From distant parts of the jungle, creatures of all kinds learned to respect the alpha predator and the human who had earned her trust. Hunters gave way when they saw them together. Even predators who once dared to challenge Rava now approached cautiously, aware of the unusual alliance. Tomas had found more than survival in the jungle. He had found a family, a purpose, and a home. Rava had found something rare as well, a companion who could match her strength with thought, patience, and courage. The cubs had learned a lesson no predator could teach alone, that trust and cooperation could make even the strongest safer and stronger. And so, in the heart of Vera, a new pack thrived. Armor clinked against scales, claws dug into the earth, and laughter filled the jungle. The alpha predator and her cubs, together with the human who had once crashed into their world, had created something extraordinary. Legends would grow of this pack, of the human who stood with an alpha predator, and of cubs who wore armor and played like warriors. Yet for Tomas, Rava, and their young, the legend was simple. Trust, courage, and shared strength had forged a family stronger than any threat the jungle could offer. The moon rose over the treetops, casting silver light on the clearing. Tomas, Rava, and the cubs rested, knowing the jungle would always challenge them, but together, they could face anything. Their bond was unbreakable, their strength unmatched, and their story had only just begun.